Hi everyone, my name's Sarah Mare. I'm one of the librarians at the Portland Public Library, and I'm here today continuing our book, Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede. This is the first book in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and it's published by Scholastic, who have been very generous to let us read this to you. We're going to pick up where we left off with Chapter 5, but before that we'll do a quick recap of some of the things that just happened. Cimarine is a princess who has decided to live with Kazul, a dragon, and be her princess because she really dislikes everything that a princess is expected to do. She would rather do her own thing. She was just putting out a sign to stop knights and princes from trying to rescue her, as she does not want to be rescued, when a wizard stopped her and had some strange conversations. She let her dragon and some of her dragon's friends know, and they were just discussing rather heatedly what they might do about it. We'll start with Chapter 5, in which Cimarine receives a formal call from her companions in dire captivity. Kazul slept late the following morning, and Cimarine was afraid that she would leave before Cimarine had a chance to ask about the dragon's after-dinner conversation. To her relief, Kazul called her in as soon as she was thoroughly awake and asked Cimarine to bring in the brushes for cleaning her scales. "What was that crystal your friend mentioned last night?" Cimarine asked as she laid out the brushes. "The one that she thought King Tokas could use to somehow find out what the wizards were doing." "The King's crystal," Kazul said. "It's one of the magical objects that belongs to the King of the Dragons." "But what does it do? And why did Wrede think that King Tokas wouldn't want to use it?" "Using the crystal is difficult and tiring, and Tokas is getting old," Kazul replied. "Zareth was right to say that the crystal ought to be used, but it will take more evidence than we have right now to persuade the king of that. As to what it does, the crystal shows things that are happening in other times and places. It's useful, but it can be very difficult to interpret correctly." "Oh, a crystal ball," Cimarine said, nodding. She tapped Kazul's side, and the dragon bent her elbow so that the scales were easier to reach. "The court wizard at Linderwall had one, but I had to stop my magic lessons before he got a chance to show me how to work it." "The king's crystal is more like a plate, but the principle is the same," Kazul said. "A crystal plate?" Cimarine blinked. "No wonder nobody talks about it much. It just doesn't sound right." Kazul shrugged. "The king's crystal is much more accurate than an ordinary crystal ball, and if crystal plate sounds odd to most people, it means that fewer of them will try to steal it." "Was that what the silver-green dragon meant when he said that if the wizard started wandering through the mountains, you would lose half your magic in no time? I never heard that wizards stole magic rings and swords and things." "Not magic things," Kazul said. "Magic. Wizards steal magic. It's where their power comes from." "How can a wizard steal magic?" Cimarine said skeptically. She climbed on a stool and began working at the ribs of Kazul's wings. "Wizard's staff absorbs magic from whatever happens to be nearby," Kazul said, stretching out her left wing so that Cimarine could get at the base. "It's why they're always hanging around places like the Mountains of Mourning and the Enchanted Forest. The more magic there is in the area, the more their staffs can soak up." "What would happen if someone stole a wizard's staff? Would the wizard still be able to use it?" "The wizard wouldn't be able to work any magic until he got it back," Kazul said. "Most of them have a great many anti-theft spells on their staffs for exactly that reason. And of course it happens anyway, now and again. And as long as the wizard and the staff are separated, the staff does not absorb magic." "It doesn't sound like a very good arrangement to me," Cimarine said. "I can think of a half-dozen ways a staff could be lost or forgotten or stolen or something. It doesn't seem very sensible for a wizard to depend so much on something that is so easy to mislay." Kazul shrugged. "They seem to like it." "I can see why you don't want them in your part of the mountain." "Can you? Do you have any idea how unpleasant it is to have part of your essence sucked out of you without so much as a by your leave? Not to mention the side effects." "Side effects?" Cimarine asked, puzzled. "There, turn around and I'll do your other side." "Roxime isn't the only dragon who's allergic to wizards," Kazul said dryly as she shifted her position, "or rather to their staffs. We all are. Roxime's just a little more sensitive than most. That's why we made the agreement with them in the first place." "The dragons have an agreement with the wizards?" Kazul nodded. To be precise, the king of the dragons has an agreement with the head of the Society of Wizards. The wizards stay out of our portions of the Mountains of Mourning, and we allow them partial access to the Caves of Fire and Night. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. King Toka's is getting old and forgetful, and lately wizards have been turning up in all sorts of places that they aren't supposed to be. Like that wizard Zemnar I met on the path, Simmarine said. Do you think he really was the same Zemnar that is the head of the Society of Wizards? I doubt anyone would, even another wizard, would dare impersonate him, Kazul said. He has a nasty reputation. Simmarine remembered the hard black eyes and the sharp features of the wizard that she had met. He had certainly looked nasty enough, even when he was pretending to be nice. He was sneaky, too, or he wouldn't have tried to trick her. And he had been very annoyed when Simmarine had got off the ledge without his help. Simmarine frowned. I wonder what he wanted, really, she mused. Do you suppose that he'll stop by the way that he said he would? I almost wish he would try, Kazul said. There was an angry glint in her eye, and her claws made a scratching sound against the stone floor as she flexed them. Don't wiggle, Simmarine said. If Zemnar is as tricky as everyone says, he won't come while you're here. He'll wait till you've gone somewhere and I'm alone. True. Kazul frowned. Then she looked at Simmarine, and her eyes took on a speculative gleam. He probably thinks that you are as silly as most princesses, so he'll be hoping to trick you into giving him whatever he's after. And if he does, then maybe I can fool him instead, Simmarine finished. And once we know what he's after, we can decide what to do about it. Kazul and Simmarine discussed this idea while Simmarine finished brushing the dragon's scales. There was very little they could do to prepare, since they did not know when Zemnar might show up at the cave or what he might do when he arrived. Then Kazul went off to inspect the ledge where Simmarine had met the wizard to see whether the bits of it were still invisible. When Kazul had gone, Simmarine went into the library to hunt through all the books and scrolls and spells. The behavior of the dragons at dinner the previous evening had made a considerable impression on her, and she wanted to see whether she could find a spell to fireproof herself. Until then, she hadn't realized that when a dragon lost his temper, he started breathing fire. Not that she was ever planning to do anything to irritate Kazul, or any other dragon for that matter, but the dragons at dinner had been too annoyed to be careful, and she didn't want to get burned by accident, no matter how sorry the dragon might be afterward. At first, Simmarine did not have much luck. She hadn't had much time to do organizing in the library, and most of the books and scrolls were lying in haphazard, dust-covered piles. Some had even fallen onto the floor, and there were spiders everywhere. Simmarine realized that if she wanted to find anything, she was going to have to do some more cleaning first. With a sigh, she went to get a bucket of water, some cloths for washing and dusting, and a handkerchief to tie over her hair. She worked for several hours, dusting books and manuscripts and wiping off the dirty bookshelves, and putting the books back into neat rows when the shelves were dry. She found 2 books and 5 old scrolls that looked as if they might be interesting. These she set on one of the tables to look at later. She had just pulled a stained and yellow stack of papers out of the back of the second-to-last bookshelf when she heard someone hallooing outside. Now what? She muttered crossly. She set the papers on the table with the rest of the books she was planning to look at later and went out to see who was there. To her surprise, the noise was coming from the back entrance, not the mouth of the cave. She hurried into the passage, rounded the corner, and found herself facing 3 beautiful, elegantly dressed princesses. They were all blonde and blue-eyed and slender and several inches shorter than Simmarine. The first one wore a gold crown set with diamonds, and her hair was the color of sun-ripened wheat. The second one wore a silver crown set with sapphires, and her hair was the color of crystallized honey. The last wore a pearl-covered circlet, and her hair was the color of ripe apricots. They looked rather taken aback by the sight of Simmarine in her dust-covered dress and handkerchief. Oh, bother, Simmarine said under her breath. But she smiled her best smile and said, Welcome to the caves of the dragon Kazul. May I help you with anything? We have made the perilous journey through the tunnels to see the Princess Simmarine, newly come to these caves, to comfort her and together bemoan our sad and sorry fates, the first princess said haughtily. Tell her we are here. I'm Simmarine, Simmarine said. I don't need to be comforted, and I'm not particularly sad or sorry to be here. But if you'd like to come in and have some tea, you are welcome to. The first 2 princesses looked as if they would like to be startled and appalled by this announcement, but were much too well-bred to show what they were feeling. The princess with the pearl circlet looked surprised and rather intrigued, and she glanced hopefully at her companions. They ignored her, but after a moment the first princess said grandly, "Very well, we will join you then," and swept past Cimmerian into the cave. The other princesses followed, the one with the pearl circlet giving Cimmerian a shy smile as she passed. Cimmerian, wondering what she had gotten herself into, brought up the rear. The princesses stopped when they reached the main cave, and the ones in gold and silver looked a bit disgruntled. The one in the pearl circlet stared in unabashed amazement. "My goodness," she said, "you certainly do have a lot of space." "Eleonora," the gold-crowned princess said sharply, and the princess with the pearl circlet flushed and subsided, looking unhappy. "This way," Cimmerian said hastily, and led the three princesses into the kitchen. "Do sit down," she said, waving at the bench beside the kitchen table. The gold-crowned princesses looked at the bench with distaste, but after a moment she sat down, and the other two followed her example. There was a brief silence while Cimmerian filled the tea kettle and hung it over the fire, and then the gold-crowned princess said, "I am remiss in my duties, for I have not yet told you who we are. I am the Princess Caradwell of the kingdom of Raxwell, now captive of the dread dragon Gornal. And this," she nodded towards the princess in the silver crown, "is the Princess Halana of the kingdom of Porenbuth, now captive of the dread dragon Zareth. And this," she waved at the girl in the pearl circlet, "is the Princess Eleonora of the Duchy of Torrelmarsh, now prisoner of the dread dragon Warog." "Pleased to meet you," Cimmerian said. "I'm Princess Cimmerian of the kingdom of Linderwall, now princess of the dragon Kazul. What sort of tea would you like? I have blackberry, ginger, chamomile, and gunpowder green. I'm afraid I used the last of the lapsang souchong this morning." "Blackberry, please," Caradwell said. She gave Cimmerian a considering look. "You seem to be most philosophical about your fate." "Would I that I had so valiant a spirit," Aliana said in falling accents, "but my sensibility is too great, I fear, for me to follow your example." "If you don't like being a dragon's princess, why don't you escape?" Cimmerian asked, remembering that Kazul had said that 3 princesses in a row had run away from the yellow-green dragon Morans. Caradwell and Halana looked shocked. "Without being rescued?" Halana faltered. "Walk all that way with dragons and trolls and goodness knows what else hiding in the rocks ready to eat me? Oh, I couldn't." "It isn't done," Caradwell said coldly, "and I notice that you haven't tried it." "But I'm enjoying being Kazul's princess," Cimmerian said cheerfully. "I suppose I might have been upset if I'd been carried off the way you are, but I can hardly complain as it is, can I?" Eleonora leaned forward. "Then you really did volunteer to be Kazul's princess?" Caradwell and Halana turned and stared at their companion. "Where did you get that ridiculous idea, Eleonora?" Halana said. Wara said," Eleonora faltered. "You must have misunderstood," Caradwell said severely. "No one volunteers to be a dragon's princess. It isn't done." "Actually, Eleonora is quite right," Cimmerian said as she set the teacups down in front of her visitors. "I did volunteer." She smiled sweetly at the thunderstruck expressions on the faces of the first 2 princesses. "I got tired of embroidery and etiquette." Caradwell and Halana seemed unsure of how to take this announcement, so they made polite conversation about the tea and asked Cimmerian questions about the current fashions. Eleonora didn't say very much, and the few times that she tried, either Caradwell or Halana jumped on her. Cimmerian felt rather sorry for Eleonora. The princesses swept off at last, still somewhat puzzled by Cimmerian's attitude. Cimmerian gave a sigh of relief and set about cleaning up the kitchen. She was just rinsing the last of the cups when she heard someone hesitantly clearing their throat behind her. Cimmerian turned and saw Eleonora standing timidly in the doorway. "Hello again," Cimmerian said. "Did you forget something?" "Not exactly," Eleonora said. "I mean, I told Carindwell I did, but actually, I just wanted to get away from them for a little while. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind at all as long as you don't expect more hospitality," Cimorine assured her. "I have to go back to work in the library." "What are you doing?" Eleonora asked. She seemed really interested, so Cimorine explained about the fireproofing spell. "Sounds like a wonderful idea," Eleonora said when Cimorine finished. "The dragons are very careful around us, but it would be nice not to have to depend on them, to not lose our tempers." She hesitated. "May I help?" "I don't think Gazul would mind," Cimorine said, "but you'd better change clothes first. The library is not very clean, I'm afraid." Eleonora looked down at her silk gown, which was embroidered heavily with silver and pearls, and giggled. Cimorine took her into the bedroom and found a plain, serviceable cleaning dress in the magic wardrobe. It took 2 tries before the wardrobe figured out that she wanted a dress for someone else, but once it had caught on, it provided a splendid selection in Eleonora's size. Then they went to the library and got to work. Cleaning was much more enjoyable with Eleonora for company. By the time that they had finished dusting and straightened the last bookcases, the girls were fast friends, and Eleonora was comfortable enough to ask Cimorine straight out how it was that she had come to volunteer for a dragon. "It's a long story," Cimorine said, but Eleonora insisted on hearing it. So Cimorine told her, and then asked how Eleonora had happened to be carried off by Warog. To her surprise, Eleonora flushed. "I think it was the only thing left that they could think of," she said, not very clearly. "My family, I mean." "I don't understand," Cimorine said. "It's because I'm not a very satisfactory princess," Eleonora said. "I tried, I really did, but it all started when the wicked fairy came to my christening." "She put a curse on you?" "No. She ate cake and ice cream until she nearly burst, and danced with my Uncle Arthur until 2 in the morning and had a wonderful time. So she went home without cursing me, and Aunt Ermintrude says that that's where the whole problem started." "Lots of princesses don't have christening curses," said Cimorine. "Not if a wicked fairy comes to the christening," Eleonora said positively. "And that was only the beginning. When I turned 16, Aunt Ermintrude sent me a gold spinning wheel for my birthday, and I sat down and spun, and I didn't prick my finger or anything." Cimorine was beginning to see what Eleonora was getting at. Well, if you didn't have a christening curse. "So Aunt Ermintrude told Mama to put me in a spinning wheel in a room full of straw and have me spin it into gold," Eleonora went on. "And I tried, but all I could manage was linen thread, and who ever heard of a princess who can spin straw into linen thread? It is a little unusual, certainly. And then they gave me a loaf of bread and told me to walk through a forest and give it to anyone who asked, and I did exactly what they told me, and the second beggar woman was a fairy in disguise, but instead of saying that whenever I spoke, diamonds and roses would drop from my mouth, she said that since I was so kind, I would never have any problems with my teeth." "Really? Did it work?" "Well, I haven't had a toothache since I met her." "I would much rather have good teeth than have diamonds and roses drop out of my mouth whenever I said something," Cimorine said. "Think how uncomfortable it would be if you accidentally talked in your sleep. You'd wake up rolling around on roses and rocks." "That never occurred to me," Eleonora said, much struck. "Was that everything?" Cimorine asked. "No," Eleonora said. "Aunt Ermintrude persuaded one of her friends to give me a gown and a pair of glass slippers to go to a ball in the next kingdom over. I broke one before I even got out of the castle." "That is not so surprising," Cimorine said. "Glass slippers are for deserving merchants' daughters, not for princesses." "Try telling Aunt Ermintrude that," Eleonora said. "I think that she was the one who found out that Warog was going to ravage a village just over the border and arranged for me to go and visit on the right day so I could be carried off. She didn't even warn me. I suppose that she thought if I knew, I'd mess it up somehow." "I don't think I would get along very well with your Aunt Ermintrude," Cimorine commented thoughtfully. "Oh, it wasn't so bad at first," Eleonora said. "Warog ignored me most of the time, especially when he found out that I can't cook, and it was a real relief not to have Aunt Ermintrude around anymore. Only then, Gornal brought Carindwell, and Zareth brought Halana, and they've been making life miserable for you ever since, Marine finished. Why don't you stand up to them? I tried, but you don't know what they're like, Eleonora said, sighing. Carindwell goes on and on about correct behavior, and Halana dissolves into tears as soon as it looks like she's losing an argument. And they've both had dozens of knights and princes try to rescue them. I've only had 2. How do you do it? Samarine asked. I've had 9 already, and they're a dreadful nuisance. Eleonora stared at Samarine, and then began to giggle. What's so funny? Samarine demanded. Oh, Carindwell bragged for a week because 2 knights and a prince tried to rescue her in the first month she was here, Eleonora explained between giggles. She said it was some kind of record. He'd barely been with Kazul for 4 weeks, and you've had 9. And you didn't even mention it when Carindwell was here. She's going to be furious when she finds out. Oh, if she wants them, she can have them, Samarine said. Her expression grew thoughtful. Maybe they'd be easier to get rid of it if I sent them along to another princess, instead of just trying to get them to go home. Oh, said Eleonora, and went off into gales of laughter again. Cimmerian gave her a questioning look. It's the idea of Carindwell being, being a second-hand rescue by a knight. Eleonora gasped. Oh dear. Cimmerian's eyes began to dance. I could take a good look at them first and make sure that they're worthy of her before I send them on, she suggested. This was too much for either one of them, and they both collapsed in laughter. You wouldn't really, would you? Eleonora said when she began to recover. Send the knights to rescue someone else? I certainly would, Cimmerian said emphatically. I meant it when I said that they were a nuisance. I wouldn't want to upset Carindwell, though. I'll have to think about the best way of handling it. It's a good thing that there probably won't be any more of them for a few weeks. I should have plenty of time to figure something out. How do you know that? Eleonora asked. Cimmerian explained about the sign and Thranduil and her sprained ankle. Eleonora was impressed and promised to help if she could. I'll tell Halana that you've twisted your ankle. I know she'll tell the next knight who comes to rescue her, and then it won't matter if your Prince Thranduil doesn't tell anyone. This settled, the 2 girls sat down and began looking through the books and scrolls Cimmerian had piled up on the table. Eleonora, having been brought up as a proper princess, despised the tiny size of her country. Despite the tiny size of her country, did not read Latin, so Cimmerian had to examine those scrolls herself. But there was a sizable stack of books left, however, and Eleonora waded into them with a will. It was Cimmerian, however, who found the spell that they were searching for. I think this is it, she said, looking up from an ancient crumpled scroll. Being a spell for the resistance of heat, fire, and flames of all kind. In particular, those which are the product of magical beasts, she read. Yes, there is a list, and it includes dragons. I would think dragons would be at the top, Eleonora said. Is it difficult? It doesn't look hard, Cimmerian said, staring at the page. Some of the ingredients are pretty rare, but it says that you only need them for the initial casting. After that, you can reactivate the spell just by throwing a pinch of dried feverfew in the air and reciting a couplet. That's not bad, Eleonora said. She came around the table and peered over Cimmerian's shoulder at the faded ink. Is it Latin? No, it's just an ornate style of writing, Cimmerian assured her. It's not hard to read once you get the hang of it. See, there's the couplet. Power of water, wind, and earth, turn the fire back to its birth. It's a variation on a dragon spell, Cimmerian added thoughtfully. How do you know that? Eleonora asked. The court wizard at home mentioned it when he was teaching me magic, Cimmerian replied, studying the directions. Well, then maybe it really will work on dragonfire. Can we get all the ingredients for the initial casting? I think so, but it'll take a little while, Cimmerian said. I don't have any wolfsbane, and I'm not at all sure about unicorn water. Come on, let's check and see what we need to get. They took the scroll into the kitchen and began hunting through the shelves and the supplies. They found more of the ingredients than Cimmerian had expected, and she began to wonder if one of Kazul's previous princesses might have studied magic. They did not, however, find any wolfsbane or unicorn water, nor were they able to locate any white eagle feathers. Eleonora discovered a very cobwebby jar labeled powdered hen's teeth, but it was quite empty. Simmarine made a list of the ingredients they still needed, while Eleonora changed back into her pearl-embroidered dress. Eleonora took a copy of the list and went back to her quarters, much excited, to see whether she happened to have anything useful in the dusty, disused corner of her dragon's kitchen. Simmarine doubted that she would find anything, but there was no harm in letting her look. As soon as Eleonora left, Simmarine tidied up the kitchen and put all but 2 of the books back on the shelves in the library. One was the Scroll of Spells, in which she had found the fireproofing spell, because she wanted to take a more careful look at some of the other charms and enchantments it described. The other book was a fat volume bound in worn leather, with the words Historia Dracorum in cracked and flaking gold leaf on the cover. Simmarine had decided it was time that she really got to work on her Latin. And that's the end of chapter 5, which is where we're going to end today. Tomorrow we'll start with chapter 6, in which the wizards do some snooping and Simmarine snoops back. Sounds very interesting. Thank you for joining me. Once again, this is Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede, and published by Scholastic Publishers, who are allowing us to read this book to you. My name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library, and I want to thank you for listening. I hope I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye!